Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa with Ronquita Custom Sewing and Design, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to make and apply facings to a garment. Facings are commonly used in necklines, armholes, plackets, and waistbands. This includes front and back neckline facings and all-in-one facings. Facings can often be used as an alternative to fully lining garments because it can add a professional look without added weight. Facings can also be an easier and more cost-effective alternative to fully lined garments. I teach a number of garment making classes, and these are great techniques I like to show my students, especially when they're first learning to sew their own clothes, to give them a variety of options. In this demonstration, I'm going to show the steps to make a facing for a front and back neckline. The first step to create your facings for your bodice neckline is to get your actual bodice pattern, and then we're going to trace from the pattern to create our facings. You can see this is the front of my bodice. This is the pattern piece for the front, and it's labeled to be cut on the fold. Since I'm going to be creating a facing for the neckline, it too will be cut on the fold. So we'll make a note of that. When we get our back piece, this is to be cut twice, since we're going to have a zipper in the back, and we'll do the same. It'll be cut without not being on fold. Cut two separate pieces, so I'll demonstrate that. So the first thing you want to do is measure in 2 inches from your shoulder point. And go ahead and mark that so you can see it. And then you trace the neckline itself. And then you go ahead and mark and trace 2 inches down from the center point of your bodice piece. And mark that as well. So when you remove your pattern piece, this is what you'll have. And then what we then do, first thing, mark your center front and mark your shoulder so you know what is what. And then we create 2 inches around the entire piece. To do so, you make several small marks as you're measuring in order to get a nice curve at the end. So you'll see that I have, this ruler is 2 inches wide, so here's the edge, and here's my first mark. This is lining up with here, so here's my next mark. And you just move and curve along to create that curve and that dotted line, and then we'll connect the dots. So now you should have something like this. So then what you can do is easily just fill in this space. You can also choose to use a ruler, a curved ruler if you prefer, but this is fine. So now you have your marks, you have your shoulder and your center front. So now that I have my piece for my facing, I'm going to go ahead and add seam allowance, just so that way when I attach it to the neckline of my bodice, it won't be much smaller than 2 inches. To do that, it's the same method, just going around, using your ruler at whatever your choice of seam allowance is. I'm going to do 1/2 inch. And now I'm going to cut out my pattern piece. So now I'm going to create my facings for my back piece. The method is still the same, except we're not cutting on the fold. So you only need to create one pattern piece, but remember to not cut on the fold when you're cutting it from your fabric. So again, measure in 2 inches at the shoulder point from the neckline. And trace your neckline piece. And then measure down 2 inches to the center, from the center back of your bodice. Remove the pattern piece and you're left with that as well. And then again, make it about 2 inches wide. Make sure you mark your center back and your shoulder points so that way you don't forget. By creating the notches, it'll also help you line up your pattern piece a lot easier once we get to actually putting it together. Now I'm going to add seam allowance on really fast. Make sure to label your pattern pieces. So you know what you need to do. So now you need to cut your facing pieces out of your fabric. I have this piece of fabric folded, and that's where I'll place my front facing piece right on the fold. And I can go ahead and place my back facing piece as well, just won't be on the fold because I do need to cut 2 of these as well. Now I've cut out my pattern pieces. Before I take my pins off, I want to make a notch mark where my shoulders are, just so that way I know it'll be harder to tell once your pattern piece is off for your center back, to determine where your center back and your shoulders pieces are. So just make a quick little teeny notch, and now you can remove your pins. Remove your pattern pieces, set them aside. Now this is what you should have. 1 for your front neckline on the fold, and then 2 separate pieces for your back. Now the next step is to attach your pieces together. So you're going to stitch them together. So I'll be putting right sides together at the shoulders. Pin. And I'll be stitching here at the shoulder line. So now I've sewn them together, all the pieces, and now I'm going to press open the seams at my shoulder line. So the shoulder seams will be pressed open, and then once they're pressed open, I'm going to finish them off by doing an overlock along the entire edge of the facings. I finished the bottom edge of the facings with an overlock stitch. You can choose to use pinking shears or an over edge stitch on your sewing machine, or another method, however you choose to finish it. You do want to make sure you finish the bottom or the outer part of your facings, because that's what's going to show and that's what will be exposed. The neckline does not need to be finished because this will be attached to your bodice itself. Therefore, it will be hidden and you won't see it. You do need to remember to press your shoulder seams so they look nice and finished when you're done. And the back piece can be finished however you choose to once you decide how you're going to close it with a zipper or whatever you choose to use. So now I need to attach my facings to the bodice. This is the original bodice that was created earlier. I will be attaching the facing to the neckline only. And most importantly, first we're going to match up the shoulder seam lines and then we'll pin around. So once you're done pinning, this is what you should have. Facings right sides together on the neckline of your bodice. Again, very important to line your shoulder seams with the facings and the bodice first and then pin around. And then you're going to stitch at your seam allowance. I'm going to be using 1/2 inch, and then we'll do some clipping and flip. So now that I've stitched around the entire neckline, I need to make some clips around the curve to release some of that tension. You just make some notches right up to your seam line every 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. So now I've clipped or notched my curve line. It's very important to go right up to your seam line, however, don't go through your seam, and go around the entire curve. Now I'm going to flip my facings inward and press. So now that I've folded in my facings to the wrong side and pressed all the way around, you can see the nice finished look that it gives our neckline. Now you have a couple of options to tack down your facings to prevent them from moving while you wear your garment. You can tack at the shoulder seams. You can also do a top stitch around the entire neckline at 1/8 inch from the edge, or you can choose to understitch. I'm going to demonstrate the understitch. For understitching, you will open your facings and you will stitch at 1/8 inch from your original seam line all the way across and around your neckline. Remember, your seams will be pressed up towards the facing, and you'll stitch at 1/8 of an inch, catching your pressed seams onto your facing, and you'll see it on the inside. You'll see your stitch line, but nothing will show on the outer part of your garment. So now that I've understitched here, you can see it on the facing, and the nice thing about understitching is you see it here on the facing, however, you don't see it on the outer part of your garment as you would the top stitch. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in learning more techniques like this, or how to make your own clothes, I teach a number of sewing classes, and I also offer private lessons. Visit ronkita.biz for more information, and find me on Instagram and Facebook as Ronkita Design. Thanks.